We're now on Daf Lamed Zayin Omid Beis, and we're going to count down 4 lines from the top of the Omid. The Mishnah told us that Hileni Imo Asasa Nivreshes Shel Zav Al Pesach HaHeicha. Okay, she dedicated a menorah of gold. This is not the menorah of the Heichal. There was a menorah in the Heichal, but on the Pesach Heichal, up on top, they hung another menorah made of gold. And that was recorded in the Mishnah. The Mishnah doesn't tell us exactly what function that menorah achieved. Maybe it was just aesthetic beauty. There's no indication in the Mishnah that they actually lit this menorah. It seems like it was just an ornament beautifying the Pesach HaHeicha. So the Gemara says, Tanu, we have a brisa. Now this brisa is going to be contested. The brisa says that b'shosha chamas orachas, what was the great function of this menorah that Hileni Amalka set up on top of the Pesach HaHeichal? When the sun rose and there were streams of light coming from the east, they bounced off this golden candelabra that was high up on the Pesach HaHeichal. V'nitzotzos yotzim mimenu. And there were shades of, he calls it Zahorios Shel Or. In other words, what happens is that the light of the sun bounces off this gold menorah. This is amazing. I mean, what do you mean, Kol Yodim? Who is this referring to? Who has to know about Kriyat Shema? Is it, for example, the Anshe Mishmar, those Kohanim who are on duty in the Azorah? Or perhaps the Anshe Maimon, which means that in the case of a Korban Tzibur, the Torah requires the Tzibur, who are the Bailim of the Korban, to be there in the Azor at the time of that Krova. But you can't expect all of Klal Yisrael, in the case of the Korban Tzibur, to show up in the Azor. So we had what's called representatives. And those representatives of Klal Yisrael were the Anshe Mishmar. And Mitzvah Hashem will talk about exactly how many Anshe Mishmar you need, and so forth and so on. So the Gemara says, Meisvei, I don't understand. You're telling me that this menorah would reflect the light of dawn when the sun rose in the morning, and that would tell everybody or convey the message that it's time for Kriyat Shema. Hakorei Shema Shachris im Anshe Mishmar. The Anshe Mamot lo yotza. And it's really interesting. If you decide you're going to wait till the Anshe Mishmar, those Kohanim are on duty, and wait to read Kriyat Shema with them, guess what? You forfeit the mitzvah of Kriyat Shema. In other words, the Anshe Mishmar will recite Kriyat Shema when it's too late. They are so busy from dawn in their various responsibilities and tasks of avodah that they won't be able to read Kriyat Shema within the proper time period. And not only that, if you decide for whatever reason you're not one of the Kohanim, but you want to link up with the Anshe Mishmar and read Kriyat Shema with them, guess what? You forfeited the mitzvah of Kriyat Shema. Now, the Anshe Mamad, what about the representatives of the Jewish people who came to the Azorah to, so to speak, I'll use the word loosely, to supervise the Hakrova, to be present at the time of the Hakrova, as representatives of Klal Yisrael. For example, the Torah in Parshas Tamid, which is your classic case of an Olas Hatzibur, it says, Sabes B'nei Yisrael, V'amart Alehem, Es Kamani Lachmi Lishai, Raf Nichochi Tishku Lakriv Li B'moado. So it seems like B'nei Yisrael, because it opens up with the words Sabes B'nei Yisrael, they are commanded to be the shomrim, the supervisors over this karma. It says Tishmeru Lakriv Li B'moado. It's referring to the Talmud. But we can interpret the word Tishmeru, Sheyu Kohanim Uleviim Yisraelim Omdim Al Gabam. That not only the Kohanim who are there for the Avodah, the Leviim for their participation, but even Yisraelim have to be there and have to be shomrim, so to speak. Now, if you want to prove that the Korban Talmud is a Korban Tzibur, which I don't know why he bothers here in the note to prove that, he says from the fact that you buy the Korbanos from the Trumas HaLishka, that means it's coming from the Shkolim that are owned by the Tzibur because it's a Korban Tzibur. Now, you can't put all of Klal Yisrael into the Azara. Never. Is lakachet kidu ma'amodos shehem anshe Yisrael sheyabdu al korban nikro anshe maimon v'tiknu esrim v'arba ma'amodos. Right, just like there are 24 groups of Kohanim, Mishmaros Kohanim, there are Kenegdom 24 groups of Yisraelim who are in the Anshe, who are the Anshe Maimon. Called Maimon hoyim mishamesh v'toro im Mishmar Shel Kohanim. Each one of these Anshe Maimon, each group of Anshe Maimon will link together with the Anshe Mishmar, right, respectively, different groups. And Kishem Shekol Misham Mishmar Shel Kohanim and Mishamesh v'Torah. Ubekol Mamad Chelik Me'anoshim Hayu Nimtzoim B'Shar Ori Yisrael V'Chelkom Hayu Kfuim Yerushalayim V'Darim Ba. So many of the Anshe Maimon would take apartments and live residence in Yerushalayim. Others came from outside Yerushalayim. Ubiyeshayis Manam Shel Anshe Maimon L'Shamish B'Tafkidam. Hayu also Shar Ori Yisrael Mispalim Al Korban Tamid, she is Kabel B'Ratzon, Umisanim, Umotziim Sefer Torah B'Yom HaTainis. So we have here a kind of shlichus concept that the Anshe Maimon were representatives, they were like a proxy on behalf of Klal Yisrael. They were the shluchim of Klal Yisrael. And now we have a situation where the Anshe Maimon want to link up with the Anshe Mishmar to recite Kriyat Shema. That's not an option. Lo Yotza. He says, Sha'anshe Mishmar Karu'u Kodem Hayom. Oh, this is interesting. Again, I don't know if all the Rishonim are going to agree with this, but Rashi Shita is, in this particular sugya, that Mibnei Sha'anshe Maimon Mashkimin, they would read Kriyat Shema before daybreak, because they were so involved in the Avodah that they may not have time to read Kriyat Shema, so they would Yotzei Kriyat Shema before daybreak. So makdimim anshe amashma likros kriyat shma kodem hayom. Mishum shechoshu shemati moshech avodosam zman rav yimonu mikriyason. Reminds me, in your Sidurim, you will see probably a paragraph after Birchas HaShachar and after the Akedah and so forth. You'll see a paragraph of Kriyat Shema, that you should recite Kriyat Shema. Now, it's very possible that that paragraph of Kriyat Shema will be read very early. Like, let's say, for example, you go to Hanetz. So way before Hanetz, you're already reading that paragraph, and you're thinking that you were Yotzei Kriyat Shema. And the reason why it was established over this, because just in case you'll be so busy during the course of the day and you'll be distracted, maybe you won't recite Kriyat Shema. Well, that's hard to believe, but it could happen. So the Anshe Mishma would read Kriyat Shema, says Rashi, Kodem Hayom, before daybreak. Now the Anshe Mamad, if they didn't want to read Kriyat Shema together with the Anshe Mishma, so when, because that's Kodem Zmano, so when did they read Kriyat Shema? When did the Anshe Mamad read Kriyat Shema? And the answer is they wanted to wait until the end of the Karban Tamid, because they were in charge. Their responsibility was to represent Klal Yisrael over the Tamid. Shabbos B'nai Yisrael. So therefore, they can only read Kriyat Shema. When would they have the free time for Kriyat Shema? That would only be after the avodah of the Karban Tamid was complete. You see clearly from this price that those who were in the Azor in the morning hours did not read Kriyat Shema with Hanetzach Chama. And you're telling me that the rays of sun would reflect off this beautiful golden menorah in order to tell the people in the Azor it's time to read Kriyat Shema. But the Anshe Mishma would read Kriyat Shema very early, before daybreak. And the Anshe Maimon would wait until after the Akrov of the Avodah of the Karban Tamid. So who he left with? Imkach, I'll just read to you his commentary. He says, Lo ichtamchu hanitzoim bazar klal banivreshes. Nobody gained anything by this beautiful golden candelabra. So what do we do with the second bright? In the light of the second brisa, how do we interpret the first brisa? The first brisa says that, you know what we gained from Heleni's Nivreshes? We knew when was Man Kriyat Shema, but the second brisa indicates that Kriyat Shema was recited either too early or too late. No one was reciting Kriyat Shema at the moment of daybreak. The Anshe Mishma were reciting Kriyat Shema early. And the Anshe Maimon were reciting Kriyat Shema late, after the Avodah Satom. There was a third group of Jews in the Azorah. They were neither the Anshe Mishmar, who would read Kriyat Shema before daybreak, nor the Anshe Mamad, who would read Kriyat Shema after the Avodah of the Tamid. And they had to read Kriyat Shema Bismana. They didn't have any excuse. How would they know when it's time for Kriyat Shema? Through the Nivreshes of Heleni. Now, I'm not exactly sure who these people are and why they're hanging around in the Azor. He makes no comment over here. says, "Hanefreshes shimshol kesimon lechol ha'aman imsoim." No, I don't know. He adds the word Yushalayim. Okay, fine. Oh, I see what he's saying. See, I was asking who's in the Azara? If he doesn't belong neither to Anshe Mishmar or the Anshe Maimon, what's he doing in the Azara? Throw him out. So that's why I missed the point. It's Yushalayim. Now, again, I don't know if this is a miracle. Could you imagine that you're outside the Azara, you're not in the Beis HaMikdash, and you could see the rays of sun as they bounce off this nivreshes. And the implication is you're anywhere in Yerushalayim. You don't have to be beyond the threshold of the Azara. I was thinking, for those who daven hanetz, this is a great thing. Now they've developed all these sophisticated clocks, that they'll tell you to the hundredth of a second, what time it is. But back in the time of the Mikdash, it was a cinch. If I wanted to daven hanetz, I just waited until I see the bouncing of the rays off the nivreshes, and I knew now it's time to recite Kriyas, and immediately after that to recite Shmones. Just see if he by any chance adds anything here. It's Zion. He says, sparkle the reflected light would radiate from the candelabrum. When the sun rose in the east, its first rays reflected off the candelabrum in the entrance of the Heichel to the west. People standing in the Azara would see the candelabra glitter brilliant. Sounds like a good subject for a good piece of art. The glittering of the first sun rays off a golden candelabra. If you've ever heard of Vermeer, he would have had a beautiful painting for this. And everyone knew it was time for Kriyat Shema. Okay. So this is what we call sunrise, Hanetz. Beisvei, etc., etc. He says, who then benefited from the candelabra's indication of sunrise? Right? It couldn't have been the Anshe Mishmar because they recited Kriyat Shema much earlier. It couldn't have been the Anshe Mamad. They recited Kriyat Shema much later. Omar Abaye, the signal was for the benefit of the rest of the people in Jerusalem. And there were people not involved with the sacrificial service, who would frequent the Azara. He's learning that it's not Yerushalayim, it's the Azara. Well, why would anybody be hanging around the Azara? That's a disappointment. Anyway, Afi Asa Tavla Shel Zahav, right? She took a platter or let's see how he translates a plate, maybe. A tablet. Right? And what she did was she had a scribe write the parsha of Sota, so that if they brought a Sota to the Beis HaMikdash, the scribe would easily be able to copy over the parsha, and then they would mix it together with the Mayim HaMarorim, and she would have to drink it. And apparently the Chazal were very happy with this, that she took it upon herself to create this golden tablet and hired a scribe to write the Parshat Sota, inscribe it on this tablet. Shamet Minah, derived from this Mishnah that Kosim Megillah Latinok was Slavic for both sides. You're not allowed to write a parsha of the Torah on anything. Not a klaf, not a tavla shel zav. Torah has to be written in its fullness, unless you have a certain justifying purpose. So, for example, is tinot lislamed bo. You want to teach a child some section in the Torah, you're allowed to write that section on a separate parchment in order to facilitate teaching in that section in the Torah. And what that means is that we can be more lenient and flexible whenever necessary to be matir writing a parsha in the Torah in and of itself. And that's what we did in order to facilitate the Megillah Sota. We wrote a Megillah and we were allowed to do that.
Yeah, but I have a question. I have seen like clapping of Pitom Ketores. How come?
Right, so you'll have to wait until the punchline in this Gemara. But you're right. At this point in the Gemara, it's got to be a katan mislamin. It seems like the only heter is for the mitzvah Talmud Torah. Now, would reading the parts of the Ketores come under this category of lislamed? I don't know. But the Gemara is saying that according to one man Yoma, this is a machlokas in Gitna Daf Samach, the Torah can never be written in Megillos, meaning separate Megillos for parts of the Torah, segments of the Torah. It's all or nothing. And if that be the case, then we don't understand why the Chazal applauded Hileni when she made this tavla, of Zav. How is that mutter? So the Gemara says I can only justify it according to that man the Omer that the Torah was given Megillah, which is one man the Omer. Moshe Rabbeinu wrote segments of the Torah at different times in his life, in his career. And that's going to be a matir if, for the sake of teaching Torah, Moshe would write part of the Torah down, a segment of the Torah, we can do the same. And perhaps we can stretch it a little bit and push the envelope and allow writing a parsha of Sota as a separate Megillah if it's going to facilitate the writing of the Megillah Sota. But what are we going to say according to the other Mandior? There's another Mandior who says that Moshe Rabbeinu did not write the Torah piecemeal, Megillah. Reish Lakish, Rav Yanai, this is Rabbi Yanai the Amora, or maybe he was the last of the Tanoim, I'm not sure. I think he's an Amora. The Aleph Bes, the Tavla of Hileni Amalka, was not a writing of the Parsha. You're making a mistake. It was only an Aleph Bes. Aleph Bes is what we call Rashi Tevos. Rashi Tevos means that if you have a word that starts with an Aleph, you write an Aleph. You have a word that writes with a base, that opens up with a base, gracious, so you write base. And we'll fill it in. We'll read it as if the entire word was written out. Says Reish Lakish, in the name of Rabbi Yanai, that's the header of Helleni's tablet. You're right. We cannot write a tablet and a whole parsha, but we're allowed to write Rashi Tevos and leave spaces for people to figure out what would be written there, because then we didn't write a section of the Torah, we only wrote letters, not words. So that when the sofer would look at this tavla, he would see the first letter of each word in that parsha of Sot, and he would remind himself of the entire word, or the entire passage. It was a memory device. It made it much easier for the sofer to write the parsha, but in truth, the parsha as a whole was not committed to writing, because we're not allowed to write a whole parsha. But what about the following price? Kosev, Roev, Kosev, Masha Kosev, I'm sorry, Kishu Kosev, Roem. He looks in the Tavla. This is Sofer, who's in charge of writing the Megillah Sota for the Hashkasa Sota. And he writes Mashakasa B'Tavla. It sounds like he's copying letter for letter, word for word, what it says in the Tavla. So it means he's not just writing Aleph Beis, he's writing out the full words. Moran says, Ema, Roev Kosef B'Mashakasa B'Tavla. He looked at what is written in the Tavla, and then he could remember and write out the entire parsha. The Gemara is going to now raise another kasha on Rabbi Yana. Meisvei, we have a brayso that says Kshu Kosef Roev Kosef Mashkosef B'Tavla. Umar Kosef B'Tavla im Shachav Ish Osav im Lo Shachav im Satis im Lo Satis. The brayso spells out the entire parasha and says that that's what's written in the Tavla of Hileni Amal. So l'chora, you can't justify the way Rabbi Yanai did the excitement and the approval of Chazal over the Tavla because of Aleph Beis. It's not Aleph Beis. The Brisa spells out the entire parasha. So the Gemara answers Hasam, and here we turn to Daf Lamed Ches, Biseirugin, which means that they never actually wrote the entire parsha in one fell swoop, but rather they would write the beginning of a pasuk as it's written in the Torah, and then they continued writing Rashi Tevos for the next pasuk or next words, and then they would come back and fill in those parts of the pasuk that were missing. For example, he says in the brisa that we had here on Lamed Zayin and Beis, it says Im Shachav, and then it says Im Lo Shachav, correct? Right? Im Shachav Ish Osach, the Im Lo Shachav. So what they would write on the Tavla is, let's say, for example, Im Lo Shachav. And afterwards, they would write Rashi Tevos until the end of that pasuk. Then they would again write the Im Lo Tzasis, and then they would write Rashi Tevos until the end of that pasuk. And then they write Yiten Hashem Osa, and then write Rashi Tevos. So what it says in the Brisa is the beginning of the three psukim that make up the parasha of Sota. I'm sorry, let me say that again. The three words of each pasuk of the three psukim that make up the parasha of Sota. So they would open up with Im Shachav Ish Osaf, all right, that's 4 words, and then they would fill it. And then Im Lo Shachav, then Im Sasis, Im Lo Sasis. So there was never a writing of the entire parasha. It was Rashi Atevos ad Sofa Pasuk for each one of these psukim. The Achakach Pasuk Yiten Hashem Osaf, and then Rashi Tevos until the end of the pasuk. And therefore, we can reconcile Rabbi Yanai with the halacha of the prohibition of writing a Megillah, because this Megillah was written by Rashi Tevos, and even though this last price that we quoted has the psukim, but if you're careful about it, you'll see it's a list of the beginning of the psukim, the rest of which were written in Aleph Beis form, not in complete form. I know it's late, but give me just 2 more minutes to finish to the Mishnah. Tana Rabbanan, the Mishnah says about the Shar Nikanor, which was the main entrance into the Azara, that there were miracles that took place. Ma Nisim Nasu Dal Soso Amru Kishaholach Nikanor Lehavi Blossos. He brought these copper doors that he wanted to contribute and he was on a boat from Alexandria, so Mitzrayim, coming to Eretz Yisrael, and he wanted to dedicate these beautiful doors to the Beis Hamikdash, to the Azorah. But the Chaziroso, when he was returning to Yerushalayim by boat, Amad Olav Nachshel, there was a storm, a gigantic wave that threatened to capsize the boat, Shebayom, Litavo, to capsize. Notlu, the sailors, Achas Mehen, they took one of these very heavy copper doors, Bitilu Aliyam, and they threw it overboard to lighten the weight, the burden of the boat. Adaylo Nochayam Mizafo, continue. Again, the Yam is still threatening to take down this ship. Bikshu Lahatil Eschavertu. They wanted to take the other door, like there were two doors, and they wanted to throw that overboard. Amalehem, I'm sorry, is Amad Hu U Krocha. Unbelievable. Nicanor hugs the door, the second door, and Amalek, he says to them, if you're throwing this door overboard, throw me with it. And that's exactly what they did. Hitilu ima miyad noch hayom mizaf. Where's our friend Nicanor? He's very nice. He's holding on to a copper door, but he's sinking in the sea. Probably the Red Sea. What happened was that there was a great miracle, and Nicanor was able to reach the shores of Eretz Yisrael while he's holding on to one of his two doors. He comes to the north in Akko. That's where they had the shores. The second door was actually caught on the underside of this boat, and it surfaced when they got to the shore. Yeshomrim, another recorded message is that Briyot Yam, there was some sort of gigantic, I don't know, maybe it was the fish of Yonah, that swallowed Bolotov and vomited forth, regurgitated this gigantic door at the port of Akko. The Allah Omer Shlomo, regarding this door, Shlomo recited at the beginning of Shir Hashirim, Koros Batenu Arazim, Ra'itenu Barosim. The doors of our house are Arazim. You get the English of the word Erez. Is it a cedar tree? No, an oak tree. What is it? It says that the beams of our houses are cedar. Okay, I made a mistake if I said oak. I meant to say cedar. Our doors are Barosim cypresses. Al Tikri Barosim, don't read it Barosim, Ella Brias Young. Right, so he's switching around the letters a little. He's taking a yud and he's putting it after the resh instead of a vav. Brias Young, of creation, a creature of the sea. And according to this drasha of Shlomo Melech is alluding to the second door of Nicanor's door that was swallowed up by a creature of the sea and now was spit forth onto the port of Akko. At some point, they did a renovation of the gates of the Mikdash, and they upgraded them all to golden gates or golden plated gates. Chutz Mishari Nicanor. They didn't want to undermine the original state of the Shari Nicanor, so that we would remember the great miracle. And when the Jews came for the second temple from Babylonia, they needed some sort of a dramatic encouragement, so they would see the doors of Nicanor in the copper, and they would ask, why is this gate different than the other gates? Manishtana. So the answer was about the miracles that took place. It's a little anticlimactic, but there's another opinion that the reason why they didn't upgrade the doors of Nicanor from copper to gold is because they didn't have any need to do so, because gold shines brightly and copper shines brightly. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, Nechoshes Klonisa Hoisa. It was refined copper. Hoisa Meira Kishelzav. And that's why it gave off its shone. The shine was like that of gold. And the copper doors shone very brightly, even more brightly perhaps than the gold, and therefore there was no need to replace it. So this leads us to the Mishnah here on Daf Lameches, Omen Alf, which Amir Shem will pick up. Thank you very much. Everyone should have a great day.